And at exactly 37 minutes past 4 p.m. Central African time, welcome back. It is the weekend edition of the Iftar Drive. My name is Zahid Jadwid. We are together for the next 2 hours or so as we wind down towards Iftar. Just before the ad break, I did leave you with the question of whether you are comfortable drinking your tap water, especially if you reside in Johannesburg. That, of course, considering all that we've heard in our interview with the previous guest, Professor Craig Sheridan, speaking about the dangers of tap water amidst ongoing water issues in the city. But I look forward to hearing from you on that. Remember the WhatsApp line 0617660355, 0617660355, and of course you can reach us on Twitter at Salam Media. But let's move on now to our next segment. And this is also one of the new segments we've just introduced for the weekend edition of the Iftar Drive during Ramadan. And this, of course, is called Palestine Watch, where we look at the latest developments or the developments of the past week that have occurred in Palestine. We know a genocide is well underway in that part of the world, and we make dua that it works. You know, we make dua that things work out for them at the end of the day. But let's now introduce our guest, and that, of course, Brother Khalid Vawda from Social Intifada. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining us.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Jazakallah khair for having us.
All right. So we're looking at the situation in Palestine, certainly something many have been watching for the last 5 months or so, and unfortunately not really getting better as we've been watching it, has it? You are working at Social Intifada. I think this is a brilliant initiative that has come up in recent months. And this is, of course, I think one of the aims there is to counter the narrative that has been dominant for far too long in favor of the apartheid regime in Israel. Talk to us about what it is that you do and why it's important.
Social Intifada was formed by some lifelong activists around November of last year. And this was mainly to counter or to add to the narrative in the social media sphere. We know that the propaganda machine was on full swing with mainstream media for many decades, and with controlling the narrative that comes out from the Israeli mouthpieces. So social media has helped to turn the narrative and public opinion in this particular latest offensive. Offensive is a mild word; it's the genocide. And people's accounts globally have taken on, lives of their own in terms of disseminating information. People have started doing research. Organizations have leveraged social media as well, because you don't have the restrictions that you would have on mainstream media, where things are controlled from upstairs. So as a small initiative, Social Intifada was launched around November last year to disseminate information, to be able to educate, to be able to empower the public, and put out the truth that comes out from occupied Palestine, because the mainstream media is still what we're up against, and official narratives that governments and people in influential positions follow and adopt.
I mean, as you say that, I'm just thinking to the offensive that occurred in, I think it was May of 2021. And I was newly on TikTok at the time. I had initially been skeptical about joining TikTok, but eventually by that time I was there. And this was the first time I noticed how the power really of social media to counter mainstream narratives and to take forward the idea of giving a voice to the voiceless. And when we look at this in this time around, I think social media has once again proven itself to be quite an effective tool at countering that narrative, won't you say?
Absolutely, because it's given a lens, and it's given a voice and a microphone to people on the streets. And without that, we would not have seen the horrors that are being committed in Gaza this time around. We would not have seen what's coming out of Masjid al-Aqsa and the brutalities happening in the West Bank as well. So individuals on the ground have picked up cameras. They've fast-tracked themselves in becoming reporters or journalists in a broader sense of the word, and just getting the information and the sentiment out. I think that's an important element of social media, which mainstream media doesn't capture, is you capture the essence of the individual who's sending out the message. It could be very emotive because it's a first person lens, it's a first person view of what's happening on the ground. And that has been conveyed through the many cameras and via the hands of many individuals in Gaza this time around.
Mm. All right, so today is day 163 of this war of extermination. 31,645 Palestinians have been killed, 73,676 have been wounded. We're looking at the latest developments this week. An Israeli delegation is set to visit Qatar tomorrow. Hopefully, what's on the table there is a ceasefire. And then we're seeing protests being held as well. We're seeing Israel approving a plan to attack Rafah. We know this was supposed to come as soon as Ramadan had started, and now we have further clarity on that. We're seeing the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying we will enter Rafah despite what he calls international pressure. What's going on here?
So Israel's under pressure, locally and abroad, and within themselves, within their own circles. They initially stated, obviously, their goals of this offensive was to release all their hostages, to bring them back alive, to get rid of Hamas entirely, and to ensure that it never poses a threat to the safety and security of Israel ever again. We're now in 4 or 5 months later, and Israel hasn't achieved any of those objectives. In fact, things have gotten worse. The only way hostages have been freed thus far has been through the first round of negotiations with Hamas. So whether they like it or not, they're going to have to sit down and negotiate with Hamas. The offensive and then the bombing of Gaza has resulted in more than 30,000 deaths, more than 70,000 injured. So you've had over 100,000 people who've either been killed or been injured or sustained injuries and are trapped under the rubble. And that number's set to rise. It's rising every day. This is doing Israel no favors on the international front. They're fast losing public opinion, and they're losing, slowly it's starting to eat away at their friendships with the strongest allies that they've had over the years. So this particular delegation going to Qatar, according to the public broadcaster in Israel, KAN, would be headed by the Mossad president, David Bania, because the cabinet has been deliberating on a ceasefire. And this follows on the proposal from Hamas last week on an exchange program to basically end the hostilities. And what it seeks to do is to exchange prisoners on both sides, a staggered approach to this, being phased in 3 phases, and each phase lasting 42 days between each of them. And obviously, there's further conditions that have been laid down, but that's the broader scope of what Hamas have presented. Ultimately, with the goal of military being removed from Gaza, Gaza being allowed aid to come in, reconstruction materials to come in, and Gaza being allowed to rebuild. Initially, when this was proposed, Netanyahu obviously rebuffed this and said it's completely ridiculous. But the fact that he's sending a delegation to Qatar to engage in talks tells us that they have to look into some form of negotiations, because it's untenable on their side. They're going to go on killing more people. They're going to be losing more support. Just recently, last week, there was an interview on Al Jazeera with a former head of Shin Bet. You wouldn't get somebody more pro-Israeli than somebody like this. And even he was adamant that Israel's offensive in Gaza is doing them no favors, and it is losing them public opinion around the world. It's losing them. They're losing the battle of thinking, the battle of minds around the world.
And I think just before we went live in the previous show with Maurice Salakan coming out of the United States, there was a lot of conversation about how this is playing out in the United States. Of course, it is an election year there, and speaking about the iftar at the White House, should people be attending that? And I think that's something that ties into this. That you're speaking about the opinions of the public globally. When we just quickly with the issue of negotiations. We know Israel and Hamas were at the table in Cairo just a little while ago. Uh, and now we're speaking about negotiations in Qatar. What's different this time?
The previous negotiations ended abruptly, and from what we're reading into various media sources, Hamas were being pushed into a deal which would basically cede all of Gaza. It's exactly what Israel had wanted. It is what the West had wanted. Hamas to basically give up everything and to cede control to a new force that would be decided upon by Israel and by the United States. Something similar to basically what happened at Oslo. And this was rejected by Hamas. So that's why Hamas came up with this counter proposal. They're going to ensure politically, militarily, that they reach their objectives to secure the end to the ceasefire, to be able to allow aid to get in, to feed the people, to allow medical aid to get in, to treat people who've been injured, and to allow equipment to get in to be able to rebuild Gaza, because that's something that's going to take a long, long while. Now,
all right. Yes, do go on.
Just important to note there that Netanyahu is playing a game here, because on the one hand he's talking about sending a delegation to Qatar, but on the other hand he's talking about, and I think that leads on to our next topic, he's talking about continuing the plan to attack Rafah, and he's been quite strong in his language, as he has been throughout, in that no amount of international pressure is going to make us stop realizing our goals. And again, those three goals that they've been stating since the beginning: number one is eliminating Hamas entirely. Number two is releasing the hostages. And number three is to ensure that Gaza is no longer a threat. Releasing the hostages, they've already killed hostages in captivity, Israel, through the offensive and through the bombings. About a week and a half ago, Hamas released some images and names of about 5 hostages, elderly hostages who had been killed. There were a few more prior to this. We know Israel, through so-called friendly fire, killed 2 of their own, which was a highly publicized event all around the world. The repercussions of that were felt greatly in Israel, because these 2 individuals came out holding white flags, unshirted, and talking in Hebrew, yet despite that, Israeli forces shot at them.
All right. I think we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, I would really like to go on to discuss the situation regarding food and aid in Gaza. So if I can just ask that you stay with us for a moment, and when we get back, we'll continue.
Syria earthquake is among the deadliest earthquakes of the last century. Thousands have lost their lives, and large areas in cities and towns in southern Turkey and northern Syria have turned to rubble, leaving huge numbers of residents with very little or nothing at all. Al-Imdad Foundation's emergency relief team is on the ground providing life-saving aid. The people of Turkey and Syria desperately need your support. Donate online at alimdad.com or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Vawda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and freezer card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Vawda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
The people of Palestine need your support now. Africa Muslims Agency is on the ground, already providing food, medication, and emergency supplies in Gaza. Donate any amount to Heal Palestine at africamuslimsagency.co.za. Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Are you looking for a cross-border road transport company that is committed in achieving high safety standards, who is fast and efficient, and also excel in customer service? Gardi Global specializes in cross-border transport from South Africa to Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi. Gardi Global, situated at 10 Daniel Road, Bend Road, Johannesburg. For inquiries, contact our trained staff on 011 614 3108 or email info@gardiglobal.co.za. Safe long haul into Africa is our business. Gardi Global Transport.
This Ramadan, join hands with Muslim hands to make a meaningful difference in the lives of millions worldwide. Your zakah and sadaqah can be the lifeline for those in need. Together we can nourish the hungry in South Africa and across the globe, offer clean water to impoverished communities, empower women with sustainable livelihoods, and bring relief to families grappling with the aftermath of natural disasters and conflict. Be their beacon of hope today. Connect with us at muslimhands.org.za or dial 021 633 6413 to extend your support.
From samosas and half moons to cook sisters and roti, everything between iftar and seri makes sunfoil cooking oil an essential part of your Ramadan. Approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a healthy diet, this blessed month, give your family the best with sunfoil, because tradition just tastes better.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
Welcome back. If you've just joined us, it is the weekend edition of the Iftar Drive. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Said Jadbit, and you are tuned into Salam Media. Before we move on, just a quick look at your Iftar times in the major cities. In Johannesburg, Iftar today at 6:26 p.m., in Durban 6:15 p.m., and in Cape Town 5 minutes past 7 p.m. today. Before the break, we were speaking to Brother Khalid Vawda from Social Intifada. He's still with us, and we move on now to discuss the issue of malnutrition in Gaza. We're seeing reports that 13 aid trucks have arrived safely in the Jabalia refugee camp and as well as Gaza City. And this is the first convoy to travel from the south to the north of Gaza Strip without any interruptions in at least 4 months. Brother Khalid, we saw airdrops as well. Not the most efficient, the best way to get aid into Gaza, but still something nonetheless. What are your thoughts on this?
The airdrops were an insult to the people of Gaza. And they've been saying this because it made people scramble like animals for food. They dropped. It's freezing in Palestine right now. Some of the aid drops from it was Jordan fell into the ocean. People had to go into the ocean in freezing conditions to retrieve little bits of food. So this is it's a highly embarrassing and insulting exercise from whoever has been responsible, whether it's Jordan. The American airdrop was probably the most insulting because they are directly arming Israel. It's American-made weapons that are destroying the infrastructure in Gaza, that's killing the children, women, and men in Gaza, that the Israelis are using, on everyday civilians. So we even know that some of the airdrops fell on kids. Kids have died because the airdrops, the crate actually fell on top of them. And if you look at this from just taking a step back, yes, there's terrible famine taking place, especially in the north of Gaza. It makes people seem as though it dishonors the people of Gaza, because when you're starving, you'll do anything to get food. And if you have a camera lens pointing at people just rushing for food, it looks like people are savage. People are just, they're uncouth, they're savage, they're just attacking whatever comes their way. And this can paint a very, very negative picture in the eyes of anybody else. So that was an exercise, I think, purely for show from Jordan, who are guilty of actually aiding and abetting the genocide. It's a show from the United States as well, who are directly responsible for the genocide alongside Israel. So I think those the only way that aid's going to get through, and the safest and best way, is to open the blockade, to open Rafah, and to allow aid trucks to get in. We do know that, and we've seen now that there's been the first aid ship that has reached Gaza, operated by the Spanish charity Open Arms, and it's offloaded about 200 tons of food. And this is a pilot project that other organizations are looking at. However, this is very time consuming. It takes a long while. There are many aid trucks stuck at the border in Rafah, which are not being allowed in. Israeli officials are turning them away on the basis of the flimsiest of excuses. For example, the UN were complaining the other day about an entire aid truck being turned back because scissors were found on the truck, which were going to be used as part of children's medical kits. So anything that they could deem, we know it's an excuse, anything they could deem that could pose a threat, they're turning an entire truck back based on that. Additionally, we know recently we've had two publicized massacres, the first Flower massacre, and we had a second one the other day. The Israelis had full coordinates of exactly where the trucks are going to go. Despite that, they shot on the Palestinians who were going to retrieve food, and they massacred. This time around, there were at least 60 who were killed, many more injured. On the first Flower massacre, there were over 100 who were killed.
I mean, that certainly is not something we should be celebrating. We're looking at a country like Jordan, which one would assume as a neighbor has significant regional influence, and we're looking at the so-called leader of the free world, the United States. Surely airdrops is not the best that you can do in this circumstances. But just quickly then, and to wrap up, we're looking at major protests happening in Israel, thousands of people showing up for that. We're seeing protests in the United States as well, where in San Francisco, the terminals were blocked. And just quickly looking at the protests within Israel itself, we saw people holding signs, for example, paying tribute to Chuck Schumer, the US Senate Majority Leader who called for new elections in Israel. They were saying thank you very much for that. What's happening there? What do we know about the protests in Israel?
The Israeli Broadcasting Authority has been reporting protests all across occupied Palestine. So near Haifa in the north, there have been protests there. There have been protests outside the Defense Ministry in Tel Aviv. The Ayalon Highway has been blocked. There's been a gathering in Kaplan Square. Most of them are demanding early elections. The protesters outside the Haifa have been demanding a hostage swap deal with Hamas. So they actually want the negotiations to go ahead, and they want their people brought home. One of the leading Israeli publications, Yedioth Arnot, they've published a report about protesters who actually camped outside Netanyahu's house with placards saying that he's guilty. It's in his interests to continue the war. It's in the interest of his right-wing government to continue the war. It must be noted as well that there's a small number of Israelis who are completely opposed to the offensive on Gaza. They are a very small minority. The vast majority of the protesters are not happy with their lives being made uncomfortable. That's the difference here. It's not about stopping the offensive on Gaza. If they could have it, they'd prefer everything done and dusted already. But they're seeing their image starting to get hurt. It's affecting their daily lives. It's affecting their work. It's affecting, the so-called comforts that they've had. And then we know protests are taking place all over the world. The one in San Francisco was quite interesting. More than 300 protesters occupied a terminal peacefully, and ABC 7 News reported on that. They had massive banners saying "End the siege on Gaza," "Stop the world for Gaza." A slight inconvenience, they said, according to the protesters' spokesperson, an inconvenience, but to make an important statement so people passing through can actually see what's going on and shed some more light and attention to what's going on in Gaza and the genocide in Gaza. But these protests have been taking place in all major cities in the US. London's been averaging a couple of 100,000 supporters every single week who are calling for an end to the genocide.
I mean, we're looking at the protests occurring elsewhere in the world, and you just said 100,000 every week. South Africa, we say we are, we have this moral obligation to oppose the apartheid that's going on in Palestine. And here we are, very quiet on the protest front. But that's just an observation from my side for now. But that's where we'll leave it for this weekend. Shukran so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
That was Brother Khalid Vawda from Social Intifada joining us for our new installment that will be running throughout Ramadan, and that, of course, called Palestine Watch, where we'll be looking at the latest developments in that corner of the globe every week. We know genocide is underway there, so absolutely crucial that we pay attention and don't look away as this goes on. And hopefully in that way we do our bit. And we should actually do a bit more than that as well. But this is the least we can actually do to hoping and working towards justice for the Palestinian people. Let's take a break. When we come back, we dive straight into the second hour of the show. Stay tuned.